know, Terry Burton and Julie Baumgartner, co-directors of the Board of Elections of Wood County. Excuse me. And I know this is a particularly busy time and possibly a little stressful time for you, so we're particularly happy that you're here during this time. But before moving to the main portion, yes, my voice seems to be going away. Okay. I do want to share some information about the League of Women Voters' efforts in regard to the safety and security of elections. In 2016, the League launched the campaign for making democracy work. And that was to engage leagues nationwide in advancing core democracy issues. And the campaign includes ensuring free, fair, and accessible electoral system for all eligible voters by focusing the League on voting rights, improving elections, campaign money, campaign finance and money in politics, and redistricting. As you know, the security of our elections is being questioned in some quarters, and inviting elections experts like Terry and Julie to describe elections logistics is one way our League can reassure voters that the system is safe and secure. Participating in civil, respectful conversations about topics that could, in other settings, become contentious is fundamental to the way in which the League of Women Voters approaches the topics we study. And I value that element of our League as much as anything that I value, that we can have civil, uncontentious discussions about these types of things. Just to give you a tiny bit of information on Terry and Julie, Terry Burton joined the Wood County Board of Elections in 1994 and moved into the director role in 1998. Correct me if I'm wrong. And Julie, you are in your second year in that office. And before that, you worked as a deputy recorder in the recorder's office, and then you served as county recorder for 12 years. So you have a lot of experience with government. Both of you have a lot of governmental experience, and we thank you so much for being here. And we're really looking forward to hearing your very insightful remarks. So you're welcome to come.
They're already tethering me in by putting a camera here. Normally I'm a wanderer and I like to wander around, so this is going to be hard for me, but I'm going to try to stay here for the benefit of the video. Thank you, first of all, for having us here tonight. Julie has been a great partner in our process. You just heard, she's been here for a couple of years, but she came in with a wealth of knowledge about county government and how to, deal with the constituents and the whole process. And it has been a joy to have her join our office. She's now the fourth director, I think, that I've worked with. And each one has had their strengths, but Julie has been a real big asset to our office in joining us. And I'm very happy that she's been able to join in our process. For those of you that have heard my speech before, or heard a speech by me, there's going to be some things you'll probably just find that I say over and over, but I always want people to understand. Ohio elections are local, and elections are run locally. And that is essential, I think, to process and to ensure the security and the integrity of the process. The positive part about local elections is that we apply the laws in a way that makes sense for Wood County. We work with people in a way that makes sense for Wood County. And so we want to connect with people and make sure that we facilitate our democratic process for our neighbors, the people that we go to church with, go to the shopping mall with. I mean, it is personal for us. And so when people start making politics and elections national, that's hard. because it's not national. Things that happen in other places, I can't even really speak to. But what I can speak to is how we do things here in our process here in Ohio and here in Wood County. I know Julie started passing out. There's this great infographic, and I'm going to kind of work through this as we go, that the state put out. These are going to be at the polls on election day because we know that there are people out there, as has been stated, that are doubting the process. This is probably not going to convince them otherwise, but at least it's something. It's a step to try to get the facts to people about how we run elections here in Ohio and what we do to ensure that the security of their vote is taken care of. We're a Noah's Ark office. I always say this. We go everything 2 by 2. She's a Democrat, I'm a Republican. That's okay. We can be okay together. Everybody in our office, there's a Republican and Democrat at every level, for every job, for everything that we work through. That is how Ohio has been set up. We have a board of 4 members, 4 local county people, 2 Republicans, 2 Democrats. They make all our policy decisions. So as we go through the process of applying the laws of the elections here in Ohio, it's local people making the decisions of how to implement those in a way that makes sense, once again, for Wood County. I was having a conversation with somebody as we walked in, and they were telling me, and I've certainly read about all the horror stories of these other states and elections officials that are putting up bulletproof glass and are being escorted to their cars and things like that. And luckily I can say that's not the case here. There are certainly people that don't believe in our system and in the process that we do, but we have been able to at least not worry about threats of violence or threats of people taking it that extra step. And I know that I was on a conference call. The league, Jen Miller from the league, was on the call with a bunch of other voting advocates at the state level. And they were talking about what we could do to help make sure that things were safe. And the one thing I mentioned to them and actually gained some traction was, I said, we're lucky to be in the Midwest. We're lucky to have those Midwest sensibilities that while we all have passions, we also are polite about it, or at least can be reasonably polite about it. And not everybody is polite 100% of the time. I fall down on that myself. But we don't tend to go to the extremes, and that's been a very big benefit of being here in Ohio. Having been in elections for all these years, the other thing I can tell you about Ohio is we've been vetted. We have been through the crucible of the court for the last 24 years that I've been in the office. We have been in so many court cases, and they have went through, and the positive to that is our laws are really tight because of that. They address both sides of the issue of security, because security has 2 parts. It's securing your vote, but it's also securing your right to vote. And so we need to watch both those and balance both those aspects of the office as we're going through the process. But I'm going to work down through this infographic here quickly, and well, maybe not horribly quickly, but all the voting equipment here in the state of Ohio has to be certified both federally and at the state level. And so that's where we start, is that we can't just go buy something off the shelf and see if it counts votes. It had to go through a lot of testing and a lot of work to get even eligible to be bought by a county. And what I will tell you is that's a good thing, and it's also sometimes a frustrating thing. Because of that certification that has to go through, when we find things that don't work real well, Microsoft can fix things. These companies have to go back through certification to fix things, so even minor things that maybe would make our lives easier, we just have to learn to live with, because it's going to be 4 or 8 years before they get another certification of another version of software to move through. It's very, very highly investigated. These systems are put through the ringer at every level before they ever get to us. And so that's important to know. The safe storing of voting equipment. Our office, once again, everybody in our office is from Wood County. The great majority are lifelong residents of Wood County. I trust each and every one of them, both Democrat and Republican, because when we come through the door, we know our politics, we leave it at the door, we have work to do. And there's a lot of work to do, so you don't have time to get arguments. We poke each other out of good fun, but that's just being, coworkers. But we leave our politics at the door. But our office is more secure today from a physical standpoint than it ever has been. We have had Homeland Security come and do a review of our office. That was actually a couple years ago. This isn't just something we started now. We've been working on this for a while. It doesn't matter that, now people are suddenly saying, well, gee, we need to make sure we're protecting things. We've been working to protect things this whole time. We've been working in the shadows, and now we're kind of more out in the sunlight, but that's fine. But Homeland Security came in, we did a whole review of our physical space, from the parking lot to the entrance, to our voting equipment storage, and all that stuff has been changed as far as, not every aspect has been changed, but it's been tightened down. We have more cameras, we have gates, we have things just to make sure, honestly, that we're protecting ourselves. I talk to the staff all the time. We need to do this stuff to make sure that no one can say that we did anything. And so we have to help ensure that we're protecting each other in that process. But there's a lot of physical security that's at our office that never was there before. I have to remember more codes and passwords and things like that I ever thought was possible to get in my head. And I used to make fun of old people, and now I am one of them. I don't know. It's a weird situation. And then, so we go down to testing, and I think I want to get Julie involved in this because she's been implementing our logic and accuracy testing. And Susan Kruger, I have to call out Susan. She's treating DREs in the county, and she volunteered way back then. I don't know if it was league. I can't remember why you ended up with us, but she volunteered way back then, and she has been a faithful servant coming in and testing our machines every election. She's there and helping out. She is a poll worker on election day. But that's what it's about. Once again, it's about local people. The people that come in and test our machines are us. They're people from the community that come in and that we hire for 2 weeks to come in and help us test our machines. It's not somebody from a big monolithic company. It's not somebody from the federal government. It's local people that are getting through that process. And we're ensuring that our own democracy works. And so, once again, that is how that starts. But Julie, do you want to talk about how we go through the logic and accuracy testing?
Okay, for logic and accuracy testing, first I'm going to back up just a tad and let you know that we actually program our very own ballot in the office. There's a Republican and a Democrat that sit and program that ballot. We don't have a company that comes in and does that. We do that ourselves. So we have total control over programming the ballot, getting it ready, and rolling it out to everybody on election day. Logic and accuracy testing, what we do is we have over 400 machines being deployed for this election, and every single one of those we have to test. So Susan and others come in and we set up each and every one of those machines, 1 or 2 at a time, and we load the election on it, and then they vote those ballots. They vote for every race. So we always pick the top person, so it doesn't matter, but we pick the top candidate in that race, and we just vote right through that. So as Terry said, it can take up to 2 weeks, depending on how big the ballot is, but we not only test the candidates, but we also test the issues. So every one of those machines before it comes out to you to vote on has been tested, it's been verified. Terry runs reports then after we upload all of those results from those tests, and he makes sure that we have the right numbers, that every race got counted, and everything is uploading and all of our reports come out right. So we test all of those. The other thing that we test is our poll pads. So on election day, when you go in and you show your ID and they scan it and you pull up on one of the little poll pads, we also test all of those. We deploy 90 4 of those now, and so every single one of those is tested. We make sure that it pairs up with the printer, and we make sure that it pairs up with the encoder for the ballot. We make sure that when we put the voter card in, it actually puts the right ballot on those cards. So those are kind of tested in conjunction with our ICX, because we take all of those voter cards and we put them in an ICX machine. We make sure the right ballot comes up. We make sure all of the races are there, and again, all of the issues are on all of those. So every single piece of equipment that we deploy, we test first. Terry tests all the scanners. We have 2 scanners in the office, so when we have paper ballots and provisional, or somebody just trusts the paper ballot more than the ICX, or we have all our absentees that we're dealing with right now. When those paper ballots come in, those scanners have also been tested. We get test steps from our printer for the ballots, and he runs all those through. He makes sure that those are counting. We do overvotes, we do undervotes, we run the gamut of everything that we do. So every single machine is tested and verified to make sure that it works. Yes?
So what do you do if something doesn't work? You know, one process on a machine comes out wrong or something. Does that
Then
happen?
we can reset that. It doesn't, the ICX machines that we use are very reliable. They don't have issues, but we can reload the election if we need to, so we can reset those machines. And what we would have to do is we have to start all over. So if we have an error or something that's not right, if there's something on the ballot that we miss during proofing and we find it when they're doing L&A, we then have to make that change and then we start all over with L&A. So any issue we find, we just start all over and make sure that it's right.
Thank you.
Yeah, the place that we typically find the problems are with hardware, printers. I hate my printer at home. I hate all my printers at work. The printers are the problem. We need them, not saying we don't, because those paper ballots that they print out are what we use to audit, what we use for recount. So I'm not suggesting that we shouldn't have them, but it typically is a physical issue that we find. It's not really a logic issue. So, you know, that's the thing. And the thing that Julie doesn't take enough credit for is she came in and she's a computer person, and she jumped into programming with both feet. And she learned this new system so she can program, and she can tell you everything she hates about it, everything that might work okay. And the other thing is all that testing, the other thing that Susan and Julie don't take enough credit for is those machines are heavy. Those things are 40, 50 pounds, and when you're taking 400 of them off the shelf and putting them down to test them and putting them back, by the end of those days, you're feeling it a little bit. And so I give them a ton of credit. We've tried a few times to try to get a machine mover, but that just never seems to quite work out. So Julie's in there hefting machines, and so it's a really physical and it's not a stressful process because they make it fun, but it's once again because the people that do it just make the best of it. And that's, I'm always so excited to see them come in for testing, because it's like a little family that you see a couple times a year. And we get together and they do that process. So as I talked kind of through that, every ballot, there's a hard paper copy, whether it's on the printer or whether it's those optical scan ballots that people do through the mail. And the other thing is, and I've had these conversations, we had some tours for some people, because we tried to engage some people mid-year that maybe didn't have the faith in the system. And we tried to, you know, let's show them how this really works. And a group came through, and I'm showing them all our machines, because all our machines are right in our office. They're not somewhere else in a warehouse. They're right where we can watch them all the time. And I said, none of these have gotten hooked to the internet. They never will get hooked to the internet. When they came out of the box, we were there. They never got plugged in to do a software download. Nothing like that ever happened. And the gentleman looked at me and said, that's not true. And I said, I'm telling you, I've been with these machines from the beginning. I've been with the machines before that. never plugged into the internet. You just don't know. Okay, that's conversations that we just can't get by. And so in that aspect, that's going to be a tough sell. But if you are willing to come in and be open-minded, or to at least accept what, once again, the local people that are here trying to get results, I can assure you that those machines have never been plugged into the internet. None of the servers that we have, no aspect of the tabulation ever has connected to the internet. And so we make sure that that stays that way, and once again, I wouldn't even know how to plug one in if I wanted to, because it just doesn't even have the technology to do that, because that was designed in there. So, no internet. As we go through the process, and I know I mentioned we're in Ozark office, every spot through the process is done Republican and Democrat. So when we go out to collect the ballots in the box, the drop box, we do that in pairs. Once again, just protect each other. When we're putting our ballots back in the ballot room, we're making sure that there's a Republican and a Democrat. Occasionally there'll be maybe a voter that doesn't put their ballot all the way in their envelope when it comes back, and we make sure there's a Democrat and a Republican there together to put that back in the envelope, get it where it belongs, and then it can go on through the process. And so each step, we are bipartisan, and that is an Ohio thing. That's not a Wood County thing. I like to think we do it better, but that's my bragging. Our staff is just so good. They make us look good all the time, because we really stress that we want to do the right thing by the voter. We have to, treat each voter as if they're our grandma, and that doesn't mean cutting corners, but what that means is taking care of people in the right way. And whether that be at the counter in an interaction, or whether that be on the phone helping somebody through where's my ballot, or whether, once again, we're having to reach out because they didn't provide us all the information. And our staff does a real great job at making sure that people get through the process. Because I had a party chair, when I was hired on, Mike Marsh was our party chair, and he always is bragging on me, so I got to brag on him at least one time here. He's not here, but I don't care. He told me, he said, our job is to get good candidates, your job is to give me a level playing field. And I believe that's what we do at our office, is our job. We both represent our parties, but our job is to give a level playing field. And as long as we do that, we've done our job. And part of that is the security of the ballot. So we go through the whole process, and then, election day comes, actually coming up here on election day. We're going to start opening those absentee ballots. Once again, those are kept in a locked room through that process. For this election, it started a couple elections ago, but they've gotten much more active on seals. So when the polls close on election night, our poll workers have a whole lot more pieces of seal tape and numbered locks to put on it, once again, to make sure nothing gets tampered with. And that's a good thing. I don't want to suggest that each step that we do makes us better. And so this extra step of having a few more locks just to make sure that, once again, nothing's tampered with going out, nothing's tampered with coming back, is a good thing for Ohio. And we've really, I will say for a while I had some philosophical issues with audits, but I've gotten by that. I thought they were free recounts, which they are, but we're just going to, like I said, I got by that. We go through and we use those paper ballots. We don't use the machine counts. We take 5% of the ballots that were cast, and we go through by hand counting paper ballots. We're looking at the tapes. We're looking at the optical scans of randomly selected precincts. And we go through the process to then verify that back to what the computer results were. And we have to pick 3 races. There's top of the ticket, which the state dictates the top of the ticket. It's either governor or president. Then they pick one other statewide race, and then we're required to pick one other county race. And we go through that process of auditing. And I know it says on your form that 99.98% accuracy rating. Ours is 100, just in case you're curious. I know what county this is, but I'm not going to say. But ours has been 100%. Like Julie said, these machines are not real complicated. Counting votes does not take a lot of computer power, and so these machines don't miss on that. And once again, if you go through your pre-testing and you go through your election, your post-testing, your audit, it just doesn't miss. Now, what I will tell you is if you're 3 hours into an audit and you're going through, and my staff's going through a paper tape, they get to the end of it sometimes and they're wrong. Why? Because they've been doing it for 3 hours hand counting. And if you've ever counted for 3 hours hand counting, it is tough. And you think that you've marked, we use the little chip marks on the form and go through it. It is draining. And so these people that come to me and tell me we should just go back to paper ballots and hand count. Oh my goodness, you want to talk about having no clue in election night who won. You try to count 60,000 votes, hand count, that would not be a good sign. And so I give a whole lot of credit back in the day when they used to do that all by hand. I've seen some pictures and read some things on it, but it's certainly a very different process. But that's what we do, is all the way through the process, from the beginning to the end, we do everything that we can to make sure that, once again, the votes here in Wood County are taken care of, and the people that we serve every day, that their ballots are counted in the way that they cast. And we didn't have any ulterior motive to that. I'm not certain where, I've met a lot of elections officials across the country, and I'm not sure where they have a different view of that. But, I'll just have to leave that for those that have those opinions. Are there questions about security or about things we're doing or things that you're curious about? Yeah.
Citizens in Australia, France, and Canada can vote online. Have we ever considered doing that in the U.S.?
I went to a national conference in '98, and I saw 3 systems that did that, and I thought sure that in my career I would see that happen. I absolutely think it's not a prayer that it'll ever happen in my career. We've taken a step back. The DREs that we use were really starting to become, that kiosk, electronic kiosk voting that they are, was really kind of the trend towards eventually going to the online voting. Given the people that don't believe that I can do that safely, I can't fathom how I would convince them to do it on the internet.
Isn't Oregon doing it?
What I will say is I don't think for federal elections anyone's allowed to be doing it currently. Now, they might be doing it for something local or state, and that gets a little complex from an administration standpoint. I know that Arizona played with it at one time, and that was back before they had their current situation. If someone's doing it, I do not believe they're doing it for federal elections. Yes?
How do you determine or verify that polling places close on time and that votes aren't being, ballots aren't being put in after 7 o'clock, let's say, if that's when the polls close? Are there clocks or timers on the ballot machines, or how do you verify that that's happening?
Well, there's a few things I can say. Yes, the machines do have times on them. However, in Ohio, if you're in line by 7:30, even if that line is 300 people deep, we have to stay open to take care of anyone that's been in line since 7:30.
Well, that was my next question. How do you determine when you stop if you have 300 people in line at 7:30? Who makes that determination?
So what I will tell you is poll workers who have been out in the polls, and Susan can attest to this, if you've been out at the polls for 14 hours, you're very eager to go home. Convincing them, what we tell them to do is they send somebody to the end of that line. It has not happened very often. Actually, campus has probably been the only place we've ever had a significant line at 7:30. And that would be 7:30 p.m. They've never had a line at 7:30 p.m. But they will send a poll worker to the end of the line, and they will say, this is the end of the line. For early voting, I have done that role before for big elections. Sometimes I send a staff member out, but sometimes if I think that it's going to be particularly argumentative, I'll just go out and stand at the end of the line for early voting, because the same rules apply. And certainly in the presidential, when we closed at 2 o'clock on that Monday, I had to stand at the end of the line, and I had to explain to a few people that they had missed the end of early voting and that they would have to go to the polls.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yes.
I've heard on the news that in Ohio and a lot of states, there's an awful lot of early voting now, that's way up above what it's been in the past for midterms. And my question is, could you talk a little bit about the early in-person voting, counting, and lost my train of thought. Maybe it'll come to me, but maybe we could talk about the counting.
Sure. On election night at 7:30-ish, and I say 7:30-ish because people have right up until 7:30 to drop a ballot in our drop box. As soon as we have all those ballots from the mailed absentees at 7:30, those have been run through during election day, so we know all those votes are in our system. Early votes are in our system. We don't hit the button to say report, and because of two things. One, the law says we're not supposed to know what that report is, and two, I will tell you, I do not want to know what that report is, because if I do, then somebody's going to ask me something that I don't want to have to answer. So at 7:30, we get those last ballots in, and then the first report you see on election night are the early votes in person and the mail ballots that were in our office by 7:30 on election day. And so those jump at that first report. What I will tell you about that is there are people that understand elections. I dabble in the political side only in the fact that I find elections interesting. But I don't have the time typically as results are coming in for me to sit and analyze them. We're trying to count votes, so we're really not, that was back in my previous life. But the parties have a view of what those first results are going to be and how they will change as they go to the polls. There's a school of thought, I'm not going to say whether it's right or wrong, that typically more Democratic voters will vote early or by mail, and that more Republicans will vote at the polls. And so,
in Wood County, have you seen more early in-person voting for this midterm than
the thing that makes it, I will say yes, the thing that makes that horribly hard to figure out is we had COVID in there. Before COVID, I had very clear trends of where we were going. Our percentages of early voting, our percentages of absentees were going up, but they were going up at a much slower rate. COVID hit, and then we had the all-mail election. So a bunch of people that had never voted by mail suddenly had the opportunity to try it, and a few of them liked it. And then, as we were into then COVID, and then all the other information things that happened in the last presidential, where people had beliefs of all sorts, a bunch of people tried in-person voting that hadn't tried that before, and a number of them liked it. It's been hard to figure out, coming now out of that, how many of them have went back to their old habits and how many of them are going to the new habits. I do think that our early voting continues to be very popular. The people that do it love it. They come to the courthouse. It's like old home week. They come in and they wave at our office. Even when we move voting out, they think, hey, I came and voted today. They let us know they're there, which is fun. I do love. That's the part of the job that you love, is seeing the people that you've come to know over the years. But our mail ballots, I had projected, I thought we would hit 9,000. We are over 9,000 on mail. Was I a low guesser? Was I, it's just something that we kind of play with. It's a hard, like I said, the science went out of it when COVID hit and changed all the rules. And even now, I'm not certain how many people of, a certain age or a certain health risk have changed their lifestyle in innumerable ways because of just continued concern over, where we are. But early voting is, we have been busy. I think we had 300 and some today, or close to 300. And that's a good day. For us, one of the things we really love about both mail and early voting is it takes the pressure off the polls. Every person that we get voted means that at 6:30 in the morning out there, they're not in a line waiting to vote. That I'm not getting calls because there's 400 people at the church, the Alliance Church in Bowling Green. People expect there's going to be a little line, and certainly at certain times. But if we can take that pressure off that by voting them early, that just helps our poll workers out there, makes the day go much smoother. I'll start here and then go there.
Speaking of,
You can go to our website, you can call our office, you can go to the state website, I can, talk to you tonight. I will take you any way, shape, or form we can get you. Because it's a constantly changing environment. Even you think you have them all filled, and tomorrow we'll get 6 people that had life happen. And I get that. Life happens to people. Some for good, some not so good, and but that's just what's going on. And so right up until election morning, we get people that have to call off. And we ask some people, can you be that person I call at 6 in the morning? There's not a lot of people that volunteer for that. I'm not sure I would volunteer for that. So I get that. But we're always looking for poll workers. And we're looking for people that really want to be part of the system, that want to help their community for the right reasons. And not that people do things for bad reasons, but it's a chance to see your neighbors. It's a chance to help your town. Be that Perrysburg, or be that Wayne, or be that Bowling Green, wherever you are, it's helping your community to vote. And a lot of people, the people that do it all the time, much like I say, people stop and wave at us. They love to do it in their areas because they know the people, and that's great. So yes.
so a question I had was about the horror stories we hear, really not here, but in other places, about the long lines on election day. So that's one of the things that impacts that is the number of polling booths that you send to a particular precinct. So I want to know, who is it that determines that? And then with early voting, if you see that, well, a lot of people have voted early in this one precinct, we won't need as many polling booths. Can you sort of last minute pull them out of there and put them into a place where there might be a problem with long lines on election day?
There's so many great questions. So fair way to start. I will knock, this is wood, I guess, so I'll knock on this. We have not had nearly the issue with lines that they even had when I started my career. We just don't hear about it. We've tried to do a few things. One, state law requires that I have 1 unit out for every 175 eligible voters in a location. So we start from that ratio. Now, then they tell me that I can subtract out anybody that voted early or voted absentee. But I don't know that number till the Monday before. So that's not very helpful. So then the state changed it a little and said, well, you can consider the last like election and subtract out that number. But once again, it's guessing a little bit because you have these wild cards out there. Do you have a hot race? Do you have an issue that people are passionate about? Some midterm elections, it may not be about the candidates. It may be about taxes. It may be about money. And so you have to take all that in, and I will tell you it's an art and not a science. I'll go to Julie and say, I think this is what we should do. And she'll look it over and, we talk about it, and then we take it to our board, and they talk about it, and then the board has to approve it. And we do have the ability to go back and look at it a second time, but typically we don't because we have to have, we have to have our delivery company. They know exactly how many machines they can fit on a truck. We have to know how many drivers that the sheriff's office is providing for us. There's a lot of moving parts to that, and to suddenly pull 3 from here and move it over there, in the end, has not been overly valuable. We could, in some cases, we could test extra machines and we could have them ready to deploy to a certain area. But with how we've rearranged our polling locations and with really the popularity of early voting and mail voting, we just don't see the lines like we used to. And it's been really interesting to me as you go through the day, something that I don't really understand. Suddenly now at the end of the day, it just dies. It used to be busy. It used to be busy before work. It used to be busy at lunch. It used to be busy after work. But about 3 or 4 elections ago, by 6 o'clock, our pollers were calling, there's no one here. Can we leave? No, you can't leave. That's the easy answer. No, you can't leave. But people just decided they wanted to be home at night, so they did it right after work. Maybe that 5 o'clock to 6 o'clock was busy, but after that, if they hadn't voted, they didn't. And that was something we had never seen before. And so once again, I think some of that's cultural too. We have tried to get out the word to people. Our busy times are at 6:30 till the start of work. 6:30, 8:30, busy time. If you can avoid it, do so. You know, lunchtime can be busy. If you can avoid it, do so. So I think we've gotten enough word out there. And I think the people that really found it frustrating are just voting early. Once again, either in person or by mail. There's just too many options out there. Why stress yourself out even thinking there could be a line if you have all these options to do it? And I think people are really taking advantage of that.
Now with mail-in ballots, there are 2 ballots, right? An envelope inside an envelope. Now, when it arrives, do you open the outer envelope and just keep the inner envelope?
Yep, because we need to make sure that you have all your information on there. Because if you don't, then we couldn't count that ballot. But if we find that you didn't provide it, we can send you a letter saying that you didn't provide it, and then you have the chance to fix it.
Do you send it back to them, or do they have to?
No, not the ballot. No, once the ballot's with us, the ballot's with us.
So they have to come in?
No, we mail them a form
Oh.
that they can either mail or bring in. My staff is exceptionally persistent with that. That's very important to them. We will, I think one gentleman a couple elections ago finally told my staff member, I just came in just to get you to leave me alone. They were calling him every couple days. There's a period of time after the election that they have to fix that. And if we get it fixed if we're at 100% by election day or at any point after that, we no longer have to have extra hours. And so our staff is very interested in trying to make sure that they're not working the weekend after election because somebody forgot something that they really wanted to get done. And so it's been a win-win. Yep.
Can you talk about voter list maintenance and how the process for removing people from the voter list?
Wow.
Could you repeat that?
It's voter list maintenance, the purging or getting rid of voters and that process. It's become more regular. In my career, I've seen the whole gamut of it. I was there early on when they were purging very quickly. I was there for 12 years when we didn't purge anyone. Now we finally gotten a court ruling that at least has been consistent for us. I'm not saying whether it's right or wrong, but I think there is something to be said for consistency. So if you go to federal elections, they don't care about local elections, to federal elections, and you have not voted or had any interaction with our office. So you didn't vote, you didn't change your address, you didn't sign a petition, anything at all. We have not had any contact with you for 2 federal elections. Then we will send you what we call a confirmation card. And the confirmation is basically, are you there? Are you still at this address and do you want to vote? If you send it back, you're gold for another 2 federal elections. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to vote. You don't have to have any more interaction than that. If you don't send it back, then you are switched into our confirmation status. And we wait another 2 federal elections. And after those 2 federal elections, then we send you another letter that says, we're going to purge you unless we hear from you. And so we need you to respond to this correspondence. And if they send it back, they go right back active. They start the whole process over. If they don't respond, then after a certain period of time, and I will say the state dictates a lot of this, then we will then purge the voters, delete the voters that haven't responded to 2 mailings and 4 federal elections. So it typically is between a 6 and 8 year process, and that means no voting, no contact, no petition signing. If they do anything that they hit our office in any way, shape, or form, they're right back on. And of course, every time you go to the License Bureau and they say, do you want to be a registered voter? If they say yes, they're right back on. So that, you know, I think that's pretty much, I think you have to work at it to get purged or just move away. I mean, there are people that just move away, and I get it. The last thing, you know, if you're moving to another state, telling the Board of Elections you're going, it'd be a lovely thing if that were the top of your mind, but it is not for most people. And they move away, and if, when we mail that postcard to them, it's after the forwarding time, it's not going to them. So then, you know, that process works. So that's pretty much what, in my opinion, most of the purge is at this point. Yes?
Don't in the voter registration forms, isn't there a part to where you can put where you were registered before?
Correct.
And then does the new registration of your office contact the former one to tell them that they're registered with us now?
Yeah, 'cause everybody fills out that whole form all the time. No. Yeah, we're happy if they fill out the four parts they're supposed to. But no, yeah, if it's in Ohio, what Ohio has now is, while we each have our own voter database, we do send data up to the state and they send data back. And so if you are registered in Franklin County and you register here, we get an alert that says, hey, this voter is also in Franklin County. We actually transfer your voter history to us, and then Franklin County deletes them, and now you're here. And you could do that as many times as you want around the state, and your voter history and that whole process just follows you around. So people that move within the state, that's pretty easy. Out of state, that's a different story. Used to be always, you sent a letter to the other states, Board of Elections, et cetera, et cetera. That just isn't happening anymore. The confirmation process is important for that process. So. Hey, Rob.
Do you have a special problem in Bowling Green with the number of students who obviously graduate, move on? If they're in Ohio, you just explain. You may get notified if they're out of state and move out of state, and it's a problem. I worked for many years in 3D where there were a lot of students registered when many of them you didn't see elections, stayed on the rolls, and obviously had graduated and were not in Bowling Green. Is that a problem that's not unique to you, but college towns would be more of a problem in other communities?
Yeah, we talk a lot to the state about how we are unique. We're not totally unique, because we know there's at least 4 other college towns that are like us. But it's gotten better, Roger, I will tell you that. We used to carry around 4,000 people on campus, registered voter-wise. Now it's closer to 2,000. An interesting trend in the last couple of years, and I guess coming out of COVID specifically, more and more students are just registering from home. They're doing absentee from home. I know that we had a lot of discussions with the university about at least making sure that they understood their choice, and that they had the choice to either register here and be a registered voter here, or register from home. And that we really felt that was important, that the students get that opportunity to make that choice based on, whatever their concerns were, while yes, they're in our community for 4 years, a lot of them, want to vote for their school district levies at home or, things like that. So that's been a trend which has actually helped our numbers. The way that once again we've started to become more regular about the confirmation process again has helped get that down. Like I said, it's probably closer to 2,000 than 4,000. But as you well know, every time you have a year end, those students aren't going at least back to that dorm. They may be going back, but they're not going back to that dorm address. They're going to someplace else. So it's typically only the people that register in the fall that really are really there. And I also, Dr. Anderson, I have to say, I just wanted to thank you. Years and years ago, I took a class from you, a poli-sci class. And while I was a business major, I enjoyed my political science, and apparently it paid off, because I spent a career in political science, not business. So. But I thank you for being an inspiration years and years ago, too. Yes?
Can you talk a little bit about campaigning on election day? Beyond 100 feet away, are there any other rules related to that?
Beyond 100 feet, it's a free-for-all. I don't care. No, well, for me it is. we have very limited authority, and I'm happy for that.
Well, in the city park, where there's 3 precincts in the last recent years,
Correct.
there have been times where there's been like a whole gauntlet of signs
Yep.
that go around. Is that okay?
Okay, so election day, yeah, it's always, particularly in highly contested elections, it's always an issue. It's almost become more of an issue with local elections instead of statewide elections in recent years. I guess maybe local politics is personal, I guess. School board members in some places that I won't tell you have gotten into practical fist fights and things. So anyhow, it does get interesting. So 100 feet, no campaigning. We always have people that are kind of pushing that limit. All the polling locations have their 100-foot tape measure now. We talk to local law enforcement before every election. We are in contact with all the local law enforcement, reminding them of the 100-foot rule. And so they typically come out. If we can't get agreement between groups, typically they come out. It doesn't normally end up in anything more than, okay, this is the line, guys. Everybody see what the line is, and once we establish where the line is, then we're okay. Every once in a while with the 100-foot, you do get somebody, we'll get a voter that says, I was in the 4th row of the Church of the Nazarene, and these people were harassing me on the way to the polls. Okay, that might at least get a phone call, because you can't intimidate voters. Now, if the line's not out that far, we're a little limited. If there's a line that goes beyond the 100 feet, then our buffer zone extends. But luckily, once again, I'll look for wood. We have not had that particular issue, at least in recent years.
T-shirts. T-shirts.
T-shirts at the polls. So, what we ask people to do is we ask people if they would turn them inside out, if they would remove buttons, if they would remove hats. If they refuse, we do not have the authority to deny them the right to vote. I guess in the end, I really don't even want that authority. It makes it tough on poll workers because they're just trying to keep the neutrality of the polls. And every day, we voted our office for 30 days. I've had a lot of conversations with people on the 100-foot rule, on the T-shirts, trying to get just some rational thought in the process of, for the 10 minutes you're in here, could you please just, not let your voice be heard, let it be at the ballot box, and that's it. But unfortunately, there are people that push that, and we instruct poll workers to get them through as quickly as possible. And I hate to ever reward bad behavior, but at the same time, we have a lot more people to protect, or a lot more interest to protect, than whether one bad egg is doing something that we've tried to convince them to have a better thought about it.
Did you say something about observers?
Okay. Any particular? Observers in the state of Ohio have to be appointed either by a political party or a group of 5 candidates or a issue committee. A person, an individual that just announces that they're an observer does not qualify in any of those categories. So in the state of Ohio, you have to have a group or an entity willing to certify you.
Could the league
No.
have an observer?
You are not one of the 5 or more candidates, the parties, or an actual issue committees. I mean, I don't know that you actually form issue committees in that aspect. Observers are fine when they understand what they're there for, and that's to observe. And I already had one discussion, and typically that's what it takes. There's one discussion, we had a person that came to observe early voting. That's fine, they had the right to do so, they had the right certificate, we gave them the oath, the whole bit. Then they got bored and started talking to people. Well, I appreciate that, and I appreciate you wanting to be helpful. And once again, they were not doing it out of malicious intent. They thought they were trying to help a voter, they thought they were trying to help a poll worker. They wanted to do something other than sit there for 14 hours, which once again, I get. But that is not their role. And they're there to observe. And if they have questions or concerns, then it gets directed through Julie or I. And there's a process for that. So typically, once we get by, and even at the polls, we talk to our poll workers. If you have an observer, here are the rules. Here's what they're allowed to do and what they're not allowed to do. Typically, in most cases, they're okay. If they push the line early, we have that conversation, and typically that takes care of it. I think in my 28 years, I think I've only had to throw out one, maybe 2. They just wouldn't follow the rules. So, but once again, Midwest, we
So,
try
these
to follow.
observers that have on name tags or something that connect them to?
No,
So
they do not have any identifying. It is only important that the poll workers know who they are. The poll workers are in charge. See, and this is the one thing that I will say. If you want to talk about secure elections, I will take about any 4 of my poll workers who know their polling location and their precinct. They guard that thing with a zealousy that is, I mean, they are out there protecting our democracy. Because once again, they know their neighbors, they know their voters, and that's not a bad thing. And so if somebody's there that shouldn't be, they call them out on it. They're not afraid. Our poll workers are not afraid to call somebody out on why are you here, or what's going on. Now, most of the time it's nothing, we get calls all the time, 100-foot rule. I mean, they are patrolling their area. So I really, our poll workers do a great job, not only serving the community, but they're a frontline defense on security. And they like it.
How close are observers allowed to be to poll workers or to the public?
They have to be within listening distance, so they can listen. They cannot obviously watch a voter vote. They cannot hold a conversation, an audible conversation within earshot of a voter. So now, if they said excuse me or something like that, I'm not going to throw them out for that. But if they, are calling in, many of them have someone to report to. And so if they're calling in about a situation, they have to have that conversation outside the polling location where a voter cannot overhear that conversation. Texting has actually helped with that because they can text and no one hears it. But they do not have to identify themselves, and they do not. And now, if someone asks a poll worker who is this person, they can tell them they're an observer. But once again, even with our poll workers, normally the idea of an observer is more concerning than having an observer. And So I think that once again, most observers are fine. A few of them just have to sometimes, like I said, figure out where their line is, but once they know it, they're respectful of it. Yeah.
We see right now in the news that in certain states there are incidents of intimidation of voters who come to drop their ballots in the box outside. If something like that were to happen here, do you have any safety valves to address this issue?
What I will say without going too deeply into it is we've had those conversations, both in our office and at the state level, of how we are going to view that. There is going to be some variation from county to county because of where they're polling, where their drop box is located. But we have so far not had any incidents or concern. With all the cameras now on the drop box in the drop box area, we can watch pretty closely what's going on. And at least so far, we've not had any incidents or anything that has led us to believe that we will have an incident at this point.
I am not so interested in a historical explanation of what has not happened or might happen. I'm interested in the mechanisms that you can deploy if that should happen.
Well, I mean, obviously, if a person feels unsafe, then it basically becomes a law enforcement issue, not an elections issue. That's going to be the first situation. I'm not convinced that it's probably, and I appreciate that you don't want to hear my opinion upon it, but I'm not convinced it's probably going to happen during the day when we're there, because our security office is right off that area. I'm not real certain that somebody was going to do. My bigger concern is what happened if somebody came at 9 at night when no one was there and wanted to drop their ballot off, and somebody confronted them in that regard. But once again, that would become a law enforcement issue that we would be secondary on. Yep.
At each precinct, aren't lists put out during the day of who has voted, and members of the political parties come and check and try to call and get their people out?
Mm-hmm.
Is that what happens?
On election day?
Yeah.
Theoretically. It doesn't, neither party does that like they used to.
Okay.
It's just, I don't want to say it's old school. I remember when I was in college hoping, I was very involved politically, which is how I kind of ended up here. And I remember being on the phone on election day and doing that all day. Didn't like that as a college kid, but anyhow, did it anyway. They don't do those. Those phone banks, even if they do their robocalls, and most of them don't try to figure out who's already voted, they just mass call everybody anymore. So, I've taken up way too, okay.
I have a question about the future, and it's probably beyond your purview, but is there any rumor or scuttlebutt if Ohio is considering ranked voting?
What kind of wording?
Ranked choice voting.
Ranked choice.
Yeah, Alaska just went with that. I've not heard any scuttlebutt. I'm chair of our legislative committee for our statewide association, and I have not heard anyone ever mention that as a direction that they thought.
Auditing that would be fun, huh?
Well, my son actually brought this up. He is in government class right now, and that became a topic of the ranked choice voting. And I said, well, if it makes you feel any better, we wouldn't even have to change systems, because the system that we have has the ability to work in that environment. I'm not certain that I would be real excited about that, but if that were the case, we would not have to change voting systems. We could actually implement just another portion that we don't use right now for that.
Similar question then for nonpartisan primaries.
No, I've not heard anything about nonpartisan primaries. Wow, that, I would be shocked if that got through
So
from either
so would
side.
I.
Yeah.
But putting that together with ranked choice voting is one way you can start to have some impact on the hyper-partisanship
Right.
of the current system.
Yeah, I mean, and once again, I don't wanna get too far afoul of what I really, know. I am a history guy, and I guess what I would say is we are very certain that this is the worst thing we've ever lived through, and I'm pretty certain that it's not. That looking back over the history of our country, that politics has been this ugly before. I hope it doesn't stay here. I don't particularly care for this environment, and it makes it really hard as the people refereeing in this type of environment. But I think that it will swing back, whether we change our process or whether just naturally the sober thoughts of our next generation decide that they don't like how this works, and then they go a different direction. Yeah, so what I'm trying to think legislatively, if there's anything out there that they are talking about, I guess off the top of my head, I have not heard much meaningful change, and in some ways, while we all would like to fix things, I always get a little nervous when the legislature starts getting into the election law, because for everything I get fixed, there's 3 things I didn't care for, and maybe that's the nature of legislation, but anyhow.
So is there some issue that if you could change the system in some way, is there some specific thing that's at the top of your list to change to make the process better, the voting process better?
We talk, our association talks a lot about where our priorities are. I think right now, and this is, it sounds like a cop-out, but it's really not. I think we feel like the status quo, at least for the moment, might be the best possible thing. Because any direction that tends to move, I think will end up being too reactionary one way or the other. So we are really kind of just trying to promote the status quo, at least for the next year or so. And then we will start, looking at the presidential and, what things, we would like a election date not to move. That's certainly something their association is not like. The presidential primaries that seem to jump all over the place, not good for elections. That's not good administration. But once again, after we had, an election canceled, which I never thought I would see in my career, we had, been some weird things the last few years, which is, I think, why we're so interested in stability. And that's really been our watchword, at least for a little bit here. And I think Ohio's laws are tight enough that they can take that stability without becoming stagnant. Because once again, the courts we've been in, and I say it, in my career, there were elections, we'd be in 5 and 6 lawsuits as a state in an election, and I remember unpacking instructions 3 times out of a bag between the time we packed the bag and election day, because they were constantly telling us how we were going to redo the rules on it. But because of those tough times, we have a pretty tight elections law here in Ohio that I think meets a good balance between, the provisional process really catches a lot of people that maybe that weren't caught before. So, yeah.
I know poll workers are not supposed to use their computers or laptops because it's distracting, and also I think voters feel suspicious. But I have used my cell phone when I worked at the polls, and that could be a distraction too. I wonder if I'm not a poll worker anymore, but do you tell poll workers to not use your cell phone unless it's necessary? How do you handle that?
Yeah, we certainly ask that they don't use it at the table. That, if they need to use it for something, that they just, they shouldn't be at the poll pad on one hand entering a voter and on their phone with the other. But we realize that it's really, really hard in this world to tell people they can't use their phones, especially for that long of a time. So we just ask that they try to, if they need to use it or need to do something, maybe to be a little more private about it. And now that we've consolidated so many locations, there's not one single precinct location in the county anymore. There's at least 2, so that means there's at least 6 to 8 poll workers in every location. So there's a little more of an ability for a poll worker to maybe sneak away, even in a busy election. And some of our locations have a lot of poll workers. But once again, we can't have too much help. So, I'm sorry, I've been up here a long time. I promised Julie I would not talk for this long. And she knows better because I stopped by her office and again her. So. Well, thank you so much again for us coming. Do you want to have some closing comments?
No, just sign up to be a poll worker.
Yep, I am finished.
Well, I am sure that everybody in this room joins me in thanking you so much for that wonderful presentation. What came across to me, and probably to all of you, is not only your depth of knowledge of this field, but your sincere commitment to doing it right and to protecting our elections. And that's what we're about, and that's what we really appreciate. I do have to tell one little side story, though. Some of them have already heard this. But when you talk about the students voting, I don't know if you're aware, but they couldn't do that until 1974. That came forward and insisted. In fact, I believe our friend Joyce Catke threatened them with a lawsuit. Only in her passive aggressive. So thank you, Joyce. All the students, thank you too. I want to thank all of you for coming. Thank everybody who made cookies. What are we going to do with the cookies, Ellen?
We're going to eat them.
Do we have, I don't know if we had any left over.
Yeah, there's still some here.
Okay, well, all right. See Ellen. But thank you and have a wonderful evening, and don't forget to vote.